Welcome, indie game adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Jared Yeager about the distribution and the power of community.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Welcome all to our live indie game podcast, in which we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host here, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster at the Indie Game Academy, and joining me today is Jared Yeager. Jared is the head of developer relations at Oncade and is here to talk with us about distribution and the power of community, a massive area of study and terribly important for all the indie game developers out there. Jared, I am excited to be talking about this one. Welcome to the show. What are you having for lunch today?
Hey, thank you very much. Here. And, thank you for what you do for the community and everyone who's working in the industry and looking to break in. I am having Thai peanut noodles today, so I'm very excited. What are you having for lunch today?
That's amazing. Thai peanut noodles. Fantastic choice. I have no idea. I am in one of those downtimes where I am in desperate need of a shop. So just whatever's in the fridge. Like there's some old mushrooms, maybe like some ramen. I don't know. Coffee for sure. I can definitely answer that.
Always.
Yes. Amazing. Well, welcome to the show, Jared. So I was excited to have you on and excited to talk for a little bit. As I think most indie developers who have even given indie development half a shot know, community building and community development is one of the most important things for you to do as an indie to have any kind of audience by the time you release your game. There are some stats that easily back this up. One of the ones that is really that I find that a lot of first-time indies don't know is how much of the audience for a Kickstarter campaign actually comes from your own community, for instance. So about 70% of your backers on a Kickstarter campaign are from your own community. And how much of like sales happen before you ever finish your game? How much building up that community of people who care about your game, care about you, matters for the success of an end deliverable. So absolutely important topic. I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about it. Before we actually talk, before we invite my cat onto the stage, I'd love to start with our first question, which is always the origin story. So, Jared, tell us where you are in the game industry today and how you got there.
Yeah, so I'll start kind of where I am now, walk back a little bit, and then kind of get into like the true origin story there. So currently, I'm serving as the head of developer relations for Oncade, which I'll get into more detail on what Oncade is, what we do, and how that actually ties into, again, leveraging the power of, again, distribution and community. I'm also still currently a partner with Indie Fund, which invests in independent games. An advisor and consultant for multiple teams, including publisher Akupara Games, developers Ludo Systems, Terra Lumen Games. Recently joined the advisory board for Women in Games International. I'm also IndieCade's awards jury co-chair and an adjunct professor with the University of Southern California, where I also teach game design production. And then leading into my current roles, I was previously serving as the executive producer for Walt Disney Games 20th Century Studios properties. So basically leading teams of producers, working with devs and pubs on games and integrations based on everything from Avatar, Alien, Predator, Family Guy, and more. And then, I've always had, I guess, my foot in I guess you could say like the corporate game space and also indie. So actually when I was still part of Fox Next Games before the Disney acquisition, also led an independent games fund at Fox where we actually invested in Tri-Band's What the Golf. Love that game, love that team as well, along with Altered Matters, Etherborn. Before that, again, going back in some of my dev relations background, was also had dev relations leadership roles with Razer and Ouya. I was director of product development at Capcom's Beeline Interactive, their mobile division back then, and then various production and publishing roles over at Jam City, Activision, Vivendi, Sierra Games, and then actually we're going to go now back in time, like a Tarantino film, starting off actually in QA.
Nice.
And just really grateful for being been able to be in the industry for 23 plus years, worked on about 70 ship titles and integrations. So I consider I'm very fortunate. And again, I attribute a lot of it to community and mentors and people that I've worked with over the years. And we talk about leveraging community for distributing your games, but also for your career. Like community is your safety net, and then you're
Mm,
also part of that net for everyone else that you work with in the industry as well. So it's about giving back and helping of others wherever you can. I'm actually going to be participating and helping in a virtual career fair this upcoming Friday because
mm,
again, it's all again, it's weird. It's a big industry, but we all have to be there for each other like a family to kind of help support get everyone through, especially kind of the more trying, tougher times right now that we're seeing in the industry. So, to your original question, how did I get started? Like many others, really falling in love with games at a very early age. So I grew up in a very big board game family, which was great. A lot of family game nights. So we're talking like early 80s, like 85, whatever. So like when I was a 5-year old, already playing a lot of board games with them. Can't recommend that enough. Uh, and then it was in 1986. My parents, maybe regretfully at the time, they got me my first, it was Nintendo, good old NES, and a Commodore 64. And I was really off to the races
mhm,
after that, to the point where I was playing so much. Um, they were asking me to go play outside. But then it was a rainy day. It's like, well, what am I going to do? I said, well, you still can't play. So what did I actually end up doing? Um, I would modify board games and actually have friends over and have us. We drew out like 2D video game designs and then
mm,
pass them around and give feedback with each other. I kid you not, like at age like 8, 9, or 10.
yeah,
And return all sorts of, great games that we play indoors and outdoors. Fun things like that. So again, gaming, film, everything was a big part of me growing up. Loved film, performing, uh, and then actually that kind of led into high school too, where I would try to find ways to get extra credit in like English classes and others by kind of turning the books that we're reading, including Dante's Inferno, into a board game and submitting that for like a class project and things like that. So my mind was always there, like
mm,
adaptations, finding the function and form thematically. Uh, so then I eventually, still with like my heart half in theater and films, and still
mm,
wanting to do games. I got into the University of Southern California, 1998. Started off as a theater major, worked my way into the film school. Again, there weren't a lot of options, as you may know, like to just like
mhm,
I'm going to go to game school, right? And learn how to make games, and there weren't a lot of big programming classes, so I didn't really know how to get in there, but again, I love film and theater, so was taking classes there, and then met other friends who also loved games, and I actually snuck into my first E3. I think statute of limitations is over on that, but yes, I snuck into my first E3 in 1999 and was dazzled by everything I saw there. I was like, I have to figure out a way to get involved in some capacity here.
mm,
Fortunately, the university started offering just kind of some random starter game design courses taught by Tracy Fullerton and Chris Swain. Tracy still teaches there today. Is one of the big leaders in the program. Awesome mentor as well. And I just kind of soaked that all up. And interestingly enough, those classes, and actually one of the classes I teach now that's focusing on intro to game design, part of the assignments there is to modify existing board games and create your own. And there's no coding involved. It's about fostering constructive feedback and teamwork and working together. And I absolutely love that. And from that point on, along with learning that you can have cathartic experiences with games like you can with film by playing Ocarina of Time and packing 30 people into a dorm room to watch the end of that game, I
mm,
realized, okay, this is what I'm going to go do. And so um, I had a lot of film internships, a lot of constructive feedback, script reading, coverage for what scripts are great films, and kind of took all that experience and applied it later into what I'm about to get into, which is I'm graduating USC, didn't have a game design degree or anything like that, but I took all the courses I could. I went with a song and a prayer to E3 with a little resume because they still had design conferences, kind of like GDC, above the show floor, and I was talking to different designers, met the one of the lead designer creatives for Command and Conquer series. Like, I got my resume. I can't code, I can't do art, but I work well in the team, and I got design chops, I believe. And fortunately enough, he referred me internally at EA at the time to interview to be in quality assurance internally at the studio. I think it was for the Medal of Honor series, the ports then. Went in there, and that's where I leveraged, and I cannot stress this enough for anyone who wants to work in the industry. You know, you could be a great coder, you can be a great artist, but going in there and talking directly with devs and having to give constructive feedback, um, that can help the process or help a game be better is so important. If you can learn to work with others and develop the soft skills and ability to share ideas in a constructive way, and to respect people's feelings and just focus on to make something better, you can go far. I still to this day can't do a lick of code, but I attribute so much of my ability to move in this industry by leveraging those skills, even from when I was doing script reading and coverage about how to write things in ways that can help people. Recently, there's a student that mentioned something about in a project talking about like, oh, this part of the game was boring. And I said, well, how can you rethink that and talk about, hey, I wasn't as engaged in this part, like what, and then kind of talk about how to make something more engagement. Just that alone, if you're receiving feedback saying this was boring, that can hurt. It's like, and also, how does that help? And so thinking about how you can provide solutions in your feedback is key. And I was able to rise my way up in QA that way there, leverage that in my next job where I became an associate lead, leading some testers and some of the processes, and then becoming a project lead where I was leading multiple testers across larger projects, sometimes 30 testers deep, at Vivendi, Sierra Games, where you are then filtering that feedback and now talking directly to the publishing producers about what feedback and items matter, what's going to make something in the game stand out, what's going to make it clean and ship with as little bugs as possible, because as we all know, nothing ships with zero bugs. That's a fallacy. And again, developing my chops and communicating with executives and others in a way that people would trust me to take on more responsibility. And that's how I was able to make the jump from being a QA project lead about 3 years or so into the industry, or so, I think like 2005, to becoming an associate producer on the publishing side, and then working my way up on a variety of titles, then through the good old Activision Blizzard merger, and worked on games like DJ Hero, the first Skylanders game, various DreamWorks game adaptations, and then to kind of develop my mobile chops. This is where like the indie side of things kick in here. When I was still at Activision, I came up with a game design idea, worked with a couple of students at USC to make my first mobile game. And that was what allowed me to kind of get into Jam City when it was starting off to be their lead mobile social producer, and take a lot of the scrappy design chops and disciplines that I developed just making that game and bringing it into a startup environment when Jam City was really beginning to get rolling. And then also through that period as well, that's when I started volunteering to be a juror with Indiecade and reviewing lots of indie games, keeping kind of those creative feedback muscles strong, playing a variety of games at different stages of development, and giving a lot of constructive feedback. And that's how I worked my way up in that over time, to become one of the lead jurors and now the co-chair of that awards jury, trying to put a spotlight on as many great game devs and games as possible over the years, which then also then built confidence in my network of friends. Kelly Santiago, who's the previous vice president and founder of that game company, was one of the lead members of Indie Fund, saw kind of my eye on indie game development, and then invited me in to join Indie Fund as an investment partner to help fund independent games. And again, that's kind of where we bridged from where I have been recently and where I came from, kind of there, where even today I consider myself someone who has one foot very much firmly planted in the indie game space, and then also one very much still with access really to, I guess, the larger corporate game space and larger companies. And I try to serve as a gap between them. So when we talk a bit more about distribution and community, I'd like to be a connector between really great indie devs out there and then, sources of funds and publishers, and platforms for indies to be seen and heard and help them succeed. So long-winded, but hopefully that gives a good idea there and is helpful for your community.
Absolutely, it's a great story. The first question from Wendy is, when did you sleep, Jared?
Ha! I know. It's I still ask that of myself right now. It's funny, even on top of that, I actually also do voiceover for games and TV and stuff as well, and barely fit that in. But yeah, 2 dogs, 2 kids as well. I
Mhm.
do sleep. I value it probably more than ever. I think it's just about time management,
Yeah.
and just I think if anyone, again, if you're gonna be a good producer, anyone, it sounds so silly, but like it's well, I mean not silly, but it's the just making a to-do list and like setting priorities and like figuring out what you're going to cross off, what's important on a daily basis versus a weekly and monthly. It could be personal stuff or whatever. I think is great. I mean, you could just do that with, just a Word doc or Excel. I have some friends who use Airtable, or Favro or some other project management tools for their own personal life.
Mhm.
That is not a bad way to go about it, but it really is against like taking those same producer chops you will for games and applying it to your life,
Mhm.
is really key. And I also mean that too for breaking out time for work life balance as well and time for family and to your point earlier, time to get food for your refrigerator.
Yes. Honestly, what a really cool story. I think one of the things that's wonderful about running this show is that we get to run into people exactly like you. And I think for those who feel a little bit more lost, there's a templatization or examples that they can pull out of this show when they hear stories like your own. I hear some similarities to my own story. I often like to talk about how my first game
Please.
design experience. Well, yeah, the one that I felt most connected to, my first game design experience was I would frequently in elementary school ask to make board games instead of writing book reports.
Yeah.
And I never had a teacher say no, which is still kind of wild to me to this day. They were always like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And a couple of those times were really powerful. I remember reading Aragon and making a whole like dragon adventure board game. And my teacher was so like sort of enamored with it. I think, this is probably novel for her that we spent an entire class day just playing that game as a classroom. And it was, yeah, pretty powerful experience. Entertaining the entire class, just playing a board game about Aragon. So yeah, I love that. There's a lot
Like,
of stuff. Yeah,
yeah, and
I
you
think there's a
you
lot
know
of
the
people can pull
material that
from.
way, right? It's fantastic.
Yeah, right. I definitely learned a lot about it. Fantastic. I think one of the things that I'd love to hear about here is the community building you're largely using here as a way for personal career growth. And I think that is extremely important. You likened community to the safety net for an individual contributor in this industry. I have found that to be very true myself. My most recent job, I only found because I have built the LinkedIn presence that I have built. And I happened to get picked up by them when almost immediately. It took us a long time to negotiate, but I started the conversation almost immediately after I got laid off from Paradox semi recently, because they just saw what I was working on, was like, "Oh, that's actually perfect for what we need." We wound up in a whole long conversation that eventually led to a job. So I guess I'd love to hear first, maybe the 101 on that personal safety net building. For a lot of people in this industry, um, I think many of us are awkward folks, and it can be intimidating to try to network and to build out those connections and to do things like sneak into E3 and go talk to game designers. What is your introduction? What are some words of wisdom that you can give to those who don't feel like they yet have built that safety net?
Yeah, I think, and again, it's I'm talking on this podcast right now, and it seems like I'm confident I know what I'm doing, but like I've been there for everyone else, where again, like you're scared to go talk to people. You're worried what people think what you look like or how you talk, or even like they don't like the interests that you've got. I mean, I have been there, and you just kind of, I mean, it's so easy to say, just put yourself out there. But I will say, kind of walking it back, a bit, just as a way to kind of practice, just the idea of like again, going back to board games, right? Like where you have to sit in front of someone and play with other people. I will say, just going to like board game houses or playing with strangers, like where you have to force to talk with other people, or playing games with other students, or like any kind of board game clubs where you have to be social, going play Magic the Gathering with someone, or whatever. Like I think that's actually really great social practice before, like, oh, I'm going to go to a GDC and have to go up and talk to someone. I honestly think though too, like going up and altruistically just having a conversation with someone without an angle behind it
Mm,
is great. Like for example, let's say you go to an Indiecade or the Mix or IGF, going up to different booths where devs who are feeling extremely vulnerable, showing off their games, and just going up to play their game, picking up the controller and having a conversation with them and asking them about their game and just start talking. Again, it doesn't have to be an angle of anything like, oh, and
mm,
trying to get a job or this or that. But again, like that's there's no real stakes on the line there. And again, it doesn't matter if, well, the back of your mind, if they are going to like you or not, but just putting yourself in these situations where you're going to be social and there's no, major pressure there. I mean, again, that's more industry focused, but honestly, sounds crazy, but just striking up a conversation with the person who's checking you out at the grocery store or something like that, just practicing making small talk and just doing something like that, like these kind of low risk scenarios where, again, okay, well, maybe, the conversation does get awkward or gets cut off, but you've had that practice.
mhm,
I think is key. And if you're working in teams in QA or whatever and talking about games, or again playing games with others at lunch breaks, the amount of networking that I did back in the day, by just playing card games at lunch with people in QA that went on to go do other great things at Google and other game studios,
mhm.
what was key. I remember way back in the day, um, you know or you had to join some sort of WoW clan at work, to instead of like everyone going to go play golf or whatever, it's or some other sports that you hear in the corporate world. It's some of that, just like playing games together and the act of
Mm,
play, how you really can connect with others. So I think just all those simple things that you can try and do, opening up conversations and then putting yourself in low stakes scenarios to just chat with someone is step number one for me.
mhm. I can definitely agree with that. I think so much of I think maybe I want to call it two things. One is those who don't feel like they have yet figured out being social. I think as somebody who started in that space and eventually got more comfortable with it, I think a lot of it has to do with the imagined perception of the other person. So you're like, oh, they probably think I'm an idiot, or they probably think I sound super awkward. I'll give you two things. One is nobody's thinking about you as much as you think they're thinking about you. They're all
That's
thinking
right.
about themselves. That's the first one. And second of all, who cares?
Yep.
Maybe they are thinking that about you. It doesn't matter. It's okay. And in fact, it means nothing.
Yeah.
If somebody thinks this conversation with you is super awkward, it's an awkward conversation. I mean, that's fine. Whatever. It's no big
Yeah.
deal. Yeah, just let that go.
Yeah.
And then yeah, second thing, playing games is why we're all here. Ultimately, it's the shared experience of giving that to folks, of giving that to our players, and of starting as players, which is where all of us, fell in love with it in the first place. Every single person I talk to in this industry has like one game that they point back to that they're like, that was when I knew I needed to work in this space. Mine's Chrono Trigger, best game of all time. Fight me for it.
It's
Um,
absolutely one of the yeah. I play that almost every few years on the DS. I love that version. Yeah, yeah,
so
that's
good.
that's in my top five for sure.
I recently got into retro console repair, and I fixed up a Super Nintendo, and I got a remake. I don't have an original because it's so expensive of Chrono Trigger, and I've been replaying it on there.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, but just finding opportunities to play games with folks is maybe one of those easiest opening the doors that you can go for. My first industry job was at Lumosity, the brain training game company, and
Mm.
just about every lunch break we were playing games together, and a lot of it was Super Smash Bros.
Yeah,
And sitting in that room with other game developers who have their own opinions about how a game functions, works, and feels is one of the most potent things you can do for your own education, and then of course for networking as well.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and I think just remembering, like, nobody cares. We're all super big dorks, and even if
yep,
we're judging you, oh well, like doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think back in the day, I think maybe I was trying to be maybe too much of a people pleaser, but I
Mhm,
think at the end of the day, like if you're that concern about what other people think that just aren't into what you like, then probably maybe you're cutting to the chase and figuring out who you actually want to be talking to with anyway, or spending time with instead of trying to
mhm,
kind of like adapt to be everyone for everyone, right? So
mhm,
I think that's okay.
mhm. Let's get all right. So I like to get very actionable, super simple tips for folks as much as
Yeah.
possible. So, what are some of your go-to opening lines? How do you
Well,
initiate a conversation?
well, interestingly enough, like okay, that just said like I was just at PAX, right?
Mhm,
I will just go up and find the developer at the booth and just say like tell me about your game. Like I literally it's like oh, this looks great. Like tell me more. Like what is it about? And this will kind of go into the kind of the homework assignment for everyone here as well. But like I just want to know like the quick what's the log line about your game? Like who's it for? Like what makes it different special? And like can I play your game? And like I'll start from there and then just now they're going to start feeding you a lot to go with right there. And like that's the easiest thing you can do because hopefully they're dying to tell someone about their game.
mhm,
So that's always my opening. And if you're just going to these and you're not looking to go play a game, what are you even doing? So for me, uh, uh, that's it for sure. Or if I'm going to a conference, I'll introduce myself and like it's like, oh, where do you work? And like, what are you playing? Uh,
mhm.
so I just because again, like that's going to take you somewhere, or
Yep.
they might end up going off like, oh, I'm not playing. I wish I could, and this and that, and like you'll go somewhere from that.
Yeah, it's funny. I was gonna say, what are you playing? Because that's one of my easy ones.
Yeah,
Also, tell me about your game is fantastic because all of us, at least who are game developers, adore talking about what we're working on. And even if we aren't working on something, or if we haven't worked on something in a bit, we've got some past story or a future game that we dream of building.
exactly. Got
Um,
some pitch or something you want to
yeah,
do, right?
there's something. And then tell me about what you're playing is a really easy one too. When I am running classes, if we're in sort of that awkward period where we're waiting for everyone to join, that's one of my super easy ones. What is everyone playing lately?
Yeah,
Somebody has something that they want to talk about. They're excited about the most recent game or some weird feature. I know I've had my rants about games when I first played the Helldivers 2 tutorial and I earned my cape at the end. I was like, it's just the most genius example of a reward at the end of a tutorial. We've all got thoughts. That's why we're here. We want to
yeah,
talk about it. Yeah. And if all else fails, by the way, getting somebody to talk about themselves or their work or their passion, even if they're not game developers, is a evergreen topic of conversation. We
yeah.
all love talking about ourselves, and we all generally feel like we don't get enough of a chance to talk about our passions. And so, if you
That's
just
right.
give that opportunity to somebody, they'll be so happy.
Yeah, yeah. Whatever you do, just don't open with like talk about the weather like that. Don't go there. Like again, know the audience where you're going to be. Again, just
Yeah.
talk about games. That's why we're here.
Absolutely, yes. What other advice? So this area of community building. Now, I sort of assumed that this would be for indie developers and building the community surrounding their games, but here we're
Yeah.
talking a little bit more about networking and building the personal brand. What other advice or last words you want to talk about in terms of community building?
I think for me, well, I mean, are you talking about more personal brand
Yeah,
or
whatever you feel most compelled to talk
okay, yeah,
about
I'll
here.
talk about personal brand, then I'll go into building community around games.
Okay.
But I think
Hmm.
I think it really is. Again, I know everyone's like, oh gosh, like it's in corporate space, but just establishing honestly yourself on LinkedIn and some level of social media is important.
Hmm.
This will go in this for games as well. And I think keeping up, and I don't mean this in like playing some sort of angle, but I do think this has served me well. And have done this altruistically, but it's just, I don't know, you say karma or however it's paid off is staying engaged with people that you've worked with in the past, and people that you've met, even if there's not something actionable to do business wise, right? So sometimes people will just get in touch with people like either when they want something or if there's like a deal to be made, but like continue to check in with people that you've worked with over the years and keeping up appearances, even if it's like every 3 months or once a year. and keep all of those relationships warm. And I don't mean that again from playing an angle. I really do mean that from like an empathetic,
Yeah.
like again, these are people or colleagues in the industry and are people you've met over the years, and just checking in on what they're doing and how they're doing when you can.
Yeah.
Even if it's like a text or a LinkedIn message or a phone call. Um, I think that's just incredibly important. I've had certain relationships over the years. For example, actually, the great composer Austin Wintry. I was introduced to him through Kelly Santiago. He worked on Journey and a lot of other amazing games. I learned from him over our course of knowing him that we love to work and collaborate with each other on some game at some point, and we just always stayed in touch. And nothing necessarily had worked out where everything kind of lined up, but was working on a new Alien game. The developer needed a composer. Learned he loved Jerry Goldsmith and James Horner and the Alien films and their music. And it's like, hey, you know what? Let's do a demo. Get it the dev. He ended up doing then the soundtrack of orchestra for Aliens Fireteam Elite, and then got a Grammy nomination out of it. And again, it wasn't like there was any kind of angle we were playing down to that path, but it was just one of those things where we've just always stayed in contact over the years. And this opportunity where I loved his music, he could contribute to an IP that I worked on that I loved, and then that Grammy nomination came out of that forum, and it's just one of those things that you just feel really good about in your heart that it just played out that way, and it created great art. So again, that's why a good example of how like that could just play out over time.
100%. I love that. I have a really simple rule for myself, which is just it's hard necessarily to keep the Rolodex up to date, but it is often how those if we're talking about the financial safety net, that is often how those next jobs happen during periods of layoffs or whenever.
Yeah.
Is you'll somebody that you used to know has an opening and thinks of you, or you think of them. I have a very simple rule for keeping those up to date. As you said, you've said this a couple of times tonight, and I want to echo it, which is that not every conversation should have an angle. Do your best to do these things because you want to stay in a relationship with these folks. Um, that said, I have a very simple rule to keep my connections like alive, which is just when I think of somebody, I reach out to them.
That's right.
I know that sounds stupid simple, but I'll be talking with somebody and I'll remember a time where this goofy engineer, did something similar from some past job. And then when I have that moment and I recognize oh yeah, I haven't talked to that person in a long time, I'll just send them a message and ask how they're doing. And that's a really easy way that those people that have meant the most to you, you stay in contact with, because
Yeah.
whenever you think of them, the more you think of them, the more you're reaching out to them, and hopefully you're continuing those relationships. Um, I think some of those, at least this has been true for me. I'm curious if this is true for you. I think some of those people from my very first jobs, still to this day, are some of the most important people to me. I think because they taught me so many of those first lessons. Um, I've got particular engineers who really help me understand how code works. I've got particular designers who really help me understand what it's like to get deep with a player. And I've got particular project managers that I still think of as the quintessential project managers because they were just the first person that kept me organized. I think keeping those alive gives a sort of continuity over your career that is hard to keep sometimes.
100%. Yeah, you got it right on the button.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're getting towards the end of our hour, so let's get to some community questions. First one is from Joker of Aces. Joker says, "What are the differences between indie, AA, and AAA teams when coming to production? Which did you enjoy working with the most?"
It's a good question. And it's interesting. I've enjoyed all. I know that may seem like kind of oh, pick something. But I have. It's and at the end of the day, you really don't change your approach to working with any of them if you're on the publishing production side.
Hmm.
If I'm working at a publisher, I'm essentially reviewing game design doc models, materials, playing builds, and providing feedback. And I'm not going to change my approach to how I provide my constructive feedback, or review materials or interact with the teams and talk with the leads. I mean, it's just really the scale and scope of that. The one thing I would say uh, is obviously it's really more about the size of the game and how big it is. You're just working on that longer, and just reminding yourself of what you're building over time, because sometimes a quicker, smaller game, um, again, could be built by a team of any size. You're going to see those results maybe faster and turn something out. Whereas like you're working on a larger AAA team game, like a giant open world experience, that could be like a 4-year dev cycle. And I think we all like to see progress, but sometimes that is something that really slowly gets layered over time. And so you just have to kind of remind yourself and kind of boost the team through that period about like what's at the end of the tunnel, and keep everyone focused on what that's going to be. So I don't know if there is a preference per se. I think at the end of the day, my preference, what really drives me is what is interesting play and fun, right? Like I think this maybe is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but I think for me, I know a game is really special, or at least found the fun, is really cooking when uh, I've hit the end of how many hours I'm supposed to be working for the day, or I'm already finished my milestone review report, and I'm compelled to stay in that game and keep playing and can't stop. People ask me all the time about like for game investment or indie fund or anything like that. Like, how do you know when you've found something you want to do? Like, how can you confirm something's good? And interestingly enough, it just comes down to that gut experience. If I can't stop playing, I can't put it down. Um, I know it's there, and it's rarely been a case where I have felt that way and like the game has not been successful.
Mm.
Sometimes it has come down to like maybe the marketing didn't quite land, or the release date wasn't as great, but like rarely has like the Metacritic or whatever, or like audience reviews not hit the mark if I've not personally felt that way. And I think maybe for a lot of you out there, I think it's probably been a similar experience. So what really is just the most exciting thing, whether it's big or small, is is the team innovative and bringing something new to the table of what they're building.
Hmm. It's a really interesting. Are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger curve?
Oh, I've heard. Yeah.
I feel like I bring it up very often. I don't know. It's something I think about a lot. Maybe it's that moment that happens where you've learned enough about a subject to realize that you don't know anything about a subject.
Yeah.
You have there's a period of like real confidence where you start to learn more than your average person, and so you feel like you know so much. And then there's a moment pretty soon after that where you learn enough to realize, holy shit, there's so much more that I don't know. Um, as I've hit that moment for myself, um, I think a lot about the balance of that I think a lot of indies aim for, which is I'm just going to make a game that I find delightful. And that's going to be all I focus on. I'm going to make this a
Yeah.
wonderful experience. Versus, I think the more sort of the more like nuts and bolts side, which is I'm going to make a game that I know can make money, and can
Yes.
find an audience and can sustain an audience. The balance between those two, pivotally important, both very important. Parts of decision making in games is quite challenging, and is something that I have never quite found a perfect balance for. I think what I believe these days, I'm curious your thoughts, is that magic, finding the fun. I can't put this game down. I'm having such a good time. Is your prerequisite for the second part to matter.
Yeah.
The second part matters terribly. There's a statement I've heard before, which is once your game is done, you're only about 50% done because of how much it takes to actually get people to come and play your game.
That's right.
But that part mostly won't matter, or at least you're going to struggle way harder if the game isn't inherently just magical. So curious about your thoughts. How do you balance those two things?
I think that's all true.
Mhm.
I think the balance. I mean, figuring that out is key. I think going back to what you're saying, maybe the worst thing you could do, and I think we've seen some studios burned by it. And I don't think any studio that's been burned by it has ill intentions or was just trying to do a cash grab or anything like that. I just
Hmm.
think maybe maybe like not a great place to start is from like trying to chase a certain trend. Like, oh, like roguelikes or deck builders are really big. Let's build this. But then and try to get and try to make something. But like, first of all, as designers, do you even like that genre? Or are you trying to
Hmm.
attempt to do something to begin with? And also, are you looking to kind of do something different with it and maybe turn something on its head and innovate on it? Because if you're going to do that, what's going to make an audience run from the one that they already like to yours already? If maybe the big difference is the art or the theme or something beyond that. So I think, just going back to that point, I think the most important thing to do is like not chase that trend, and then you come out 2 years later and everyone has moved on, and it's tough because again, we're all trying to eat here. So like the temptation of like, okay, this appears what all the cool kids are playing right now. I should go do that. But
Mhm.
you have to think, okay, well, your game may not get out for another 6, 9 months. They could be tired of that. Like, how are you innovating on that or twisting it or playing with a different genre? And do you have expertise in that? Are you even passionate about that genre? Or is your team even passionate about that? Because I will say, like, if you put a whole team working on something that they don't really personally would love or believe in, or even would understand if they found the fun for that kind of genre, then you're shooting yourself in the foot, or you need to hire people that do. Because otherwise, yeah, I think you're just going to be in a tough spot.
Awesome. Yeah. Very something I'm always thinking about. Amazing. All right. Another community question for you is from Wendy. Wendy says, knowing all that, please, Sensei, tell me your tips for project and time management.
Woo! Um, so, yeah, I will. I think this is really important. I think if you can, and I know again, development is not done so much waterfall these days,
Mhm.
and it's a lot of agile development. But I do think, especially if you're working on the publishing side, if you're an indie publisher, but even if you're a dev working with a publisher, I think even though it can be really frustrating because you just want to get started, let's say you're going to get funded or you're going to publisher, I think it's so important to take your lumps up front. And by that, I mean, let's say you're doing your contract or milestone schedule, trying to define that as best as possible and spend as much time on that pre-planning phase so that both sides understand what the deliverables are going to be, especially early on. So that, again, I don't think anyone's trying to cheat one side or the other, but just that everyone transparently understands what is being built and delivered at every stage, especially early on, so that everyone feels like, the work is, I guess, be transparently done and we're all working from the same page. An example I will give is I was working on a game long ago. I'm still associate producer. I came on board. The game was still like pre-alpha or whatever, and a milestone came in, and I forget what some of the deliverables were. They were very vague deliverables the dev were supposed to deliver on. I think it said this was like weather phase one, and I was curious to how am I supposed to provide feedback on this. And the deliverable was like the sky just turned gray, untextured, and like these big, thick like polygons just kind of felt like didn't look like rain or anything like that. It's like, what is it supposed to be? Wrote the review, and this is a chunk of the milestone. And they said, yeah, it's phase one, and then phase two, phase three. By phase three, it'll all be good. But it was just like, how do we have faith it's going to get there? If the milestone actually said whether phase one was, it's just to show the system works and the sky is just going to be gray and it's going to be very specifically like this is how it's going to look. I think everyone would have been fine. But, you're attaching a dollar amount to what's going to be paid out to this, and then you've got the finance team at the publisher saying like, are we paying for this? Like, is this what was promised and expected? And the problem was like, what was going to be delivered was not clearly defined up front. And so from a project management perspective, on the publishing side and everything like that, it slowed things down because now we had to kind of figure out like, okay, do we need to rewrite what is actually planned? And maybe, and again, I came on board later, but was there enough time even given to the dev to really kind of build out their sprint schedule and the milestones in a way that actually felt achievable, and would work within that schedule? I don't know. But even if it does take a few more weeks, just getting that very clearly defined where possible. Obviously, you're leaving room for, you're going to do some code or, play a live build and then rework and do some stuff. But I just think that's really important. And then in your contracts too, making sure that like, hey, if a milestone isn't approved, is there actually a realistic cure period built in there? So it's like, okay, we have 30 business days to fix these issues or whatever. Like, is
Mhm.
that going to be enough time if a milestone's rejected? So I think just building a strong, transparent schedule, with also the ability to address things without just the train backing up is so key up front.
Yeah, really interesting and important. I am a huge fan of game jams. We were just talking about them at the beginning of the episode. And no matter how far I am into my career, some of my biggest game design mentors still do game jams to this day because they're these little microcosm examples. You know, they're another iteration, they're another place to practice. And something we've started doing in our community is this thing I mentioned at the beginning, the mega jams, where we build teams of 30 or more to work on a game in 48 hours. It's very difficult to make that happen because there's so much bureaucracy on a team that big. And what we do to make that functionally possible is we kind of cheat. Before the jam actually starts, we build a skeleton GDD that tells us exactly what we're building, and then we slot the jam's theme into that GDD. And I don't think something like that would be possible, at least in my opinion, without
Mm,
without coming in going, all right, you're doing exactly this, you're doing exactly this. We
yeah.
still have some room to pivot. We still have some room to talk. We still have some room to iterate. But then at least every person knows what's being delivered and knows the expectations of that delivery, and is not stuck interpreting something. That sort of miscommunication, you'll both agree to the same thing, even written down on paper, even with pictures, and build two different games, is such a tremendous part of project management in games, the challenge of project management in games. All right, we are at just about the end of our hour. So before we say goodbye, Jared, this has been a fantastic episode. I hope people have enjoyed. Before we move on, I, of course, want to do our last two things, which is first to assign some extra credit. So what can
Yes.
the audience do in the next week? It'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we've talked about here today.
Oh, an hour. Okay, because one of the things I think is important,
Yeah.
like your question of the day.
Mhm.
I think what's really important, again, we're talking about talking with people, communicating, building your community. And that I don't even think we even got like into like the distribution part of like our kind of building out for selling game. But I will say
Mhm.
it starts with that one-on-one interaction, right? So it's amazing how many students sometimes will come up and ask them like, "What's your game? Why is it important? Like, why do I want to play it?" And they get like tongue-tied. And again, people starting
Mhm.
off, that's okay. So I think for your team or everyone who's listening, I think what's great thing to practice is, imagine you're at IGF, the Mix, Indiecade. Someone walks up to you, or heck, you're trying to build a team, right? To work on this game, this dream that you have. Um, and again, like people are busy at these conferences or festivals, right? They're going to go talk to people and play game to game to game. They come up to you. I think everyone should practice. Someone comes up to you and asks, "Well, what's your game about? Can I play it?" You practice saying what your game is, what's it
Mhm.
about, who is it for, and what makes it different, special. And can you succinctly do that in like 3 to 4 sentences, like max? Because like they right there, like someone's going to decide whether it's investor or player, press or whatever. Are they going to spend, there's so many games on the show floor. Are they going to play your game? Do they want to talk to you more about maybe joining your team? Like just being able to succinctly sell your game in a log line scenario. And because if you can't speak to it that quickly, then maybe you haven't quite figured out like what is, breaking it down to what that hook actually is and why you're passionate about it and why you think there's an audience for it and what makes it different than all the other roguelites or deck builders or dungeon crawlers out there. Just practicing that. So again, it may not be an hour long thing that you're doing, but sometimes it may take an hour to kind of really figure out and distill down how are you just selling your game really quickly in conversation, because you may not have a deck to share, right? Like you've got to do it right on the fly. You're doing a mix, you're going boom 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 to person. I think practicing that is huge.
I love that, and I love those four questions that you've given here because these are four questions that I can tell you from working with the number of first timers that I work with that a lot of people don't actually have answers for. The majority of people, the four questions are, just to reiterate them: what is your game? What is it about? Who is it for? And what makes it special? Um, the majority of juniors make a game that they want to play, and that can be good. That can totally work. We've seen a couple examples of that. But I would say that is less likely to work than thinking a little bit more deeply who this game is actually for. I think that's one of the biggest ones that people don't do when they're first getting started. They are building a game that they think is exciting, and that can sometimes line up with the real audience of real players.
100%.
Totally. But even in that case, it helps for you to say, okay, so then who am I as a type of person? What about this do I find special, and who is going to find that same kind of thing special? So spend a moment. Your homework for everybody here before we say goodbye is to spend a moment to answer these 4 questions. What is your game? What is it about? Who's it for? And what makes it special? Give us a little bit of a definition of that, and then perhaps even practice it IRL. Go find strangers. Go to some events. You can, as always, be brave and post that homework assignment to LinkedIn. You can tag us, Willem Delmenthal, as well as Jared Yeager, and the Indie Game Academy. We'll be excited to see your homework posted out in the wild. Amazing. All right. Before we say goodbye, Jared, anything you want to plug or any last words of wisdom you'd like to give us?
Yeah, I would say lastly, everyone who's here, you're absolutely welcome to add me on LinkedIn. I'll post it in the chat here. Again, I'm happy to network and help anyone offline outside of this. As I mentioned before, again, I'm the head of developer relations at Oncade. We talk about distribution. Again, if anyone wants to get in touch with me about having your games on our platform, essentially what we are, I mean, it is at the core, it's about distribution community. So what we do is we essentially enable studios to earn with players and creators and influence. So if you want, you can go check out oncade.gg. So basically what's great about this is that developers, all of you out there right now, you can sell your Steam keys directly to players, and every user that goes to our game store can get an affiliate link for any game. You can promote it to your community, and you can actually earn a rev share on every key that you help sell. And since the platform fees on Oncade are a fraction of what it's taken on Steam, devs, you can take those savings, pay it forward to your community that's promoting your game. So devs and players can spend their earnings to buy other games, or they can even cash out same day. So there's no net 30 period. But what it really comes down to at the end of the day is like communities being incentivized and earning and being rewarded along with the developers. So again, leveraging your community, but also helping them out and the community, again, hand in hand working with developers. So I'm really passionate about, again, finding out how can communities and developers and their games earn and win together, and hoping that, in this new age of where distribution, I think can honestly, really be expanded beyond just your traditional channels and new ways to reach audiences, that we can really help a lot of devs and communities out there that really need support. So feel free to check us out there. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Happy to help people out however I can. And again, it's been an absolute pleasure being here today. Thank you for doing what you're doing for everyone out there.
Absolutely. It is in fact, I really love Aquapara. Do you know Buddy Sola?
Yes. Yeah. No, again, I advise that team. I still help them on content acquisition and, again, helping them find new games to publish from the indie community. Buddy's great.
I really love Buddy. We've talked with him a lot about some of the stuff that we do here. At some point, I asked, aren't you nervous about giving me all of this advice? That might wind up making us compete with you. And he said, oh, man, it doesn't matter. It's indies versus the world. And, I love that mentality. I get that same mentality from you. So thank you for your time here. It has been an absolute pleasure. As always, everyone, you can find us again back here next week, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. There's also links to everything we mentioned in the chat down below. So check out Jared, check out Oncade. And if you enjoyed this episode, we ask that you send along the recording to just one other person. That would be tremendously valuable to us. All right, I think that's going to be it. Thank you for your time, Jared.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Goodbye, everyone.
Game over.